Guided by teeth goes this country. There's a cow's mouth on the flag. A peculiar notepad holds street life dear, but the writer's not here. He's somewhere talking to tombstones about the good old days, or splashing reborn water on his latest face, or wondering how his old gun doing in the afterlife. Wondering how much death trap is in those gas station aisles. It gotta be $1 million a day on this concrete island. New engine in the moon, why it never goes down. 72 straight hours of night, at least according to everyone's posture around here. 8:30 in the morning is really 30 minutes of closing. The city shuts down for a sleepy rat race. Elevator shoe shuffle to the nearest heaven, laughing with rats the whole way up. There's scabs everywhere. In puddles of city, in concentrated schools and TV-lit warm rooms, the light reveals military fatigue. When it hits just right on the ties that are wrapped around the necks of lazy white guys, empire is too easy, baby. Chant at the walls off something if you feel like it. Best way for a target to move is shooting back, running for a tree line made of freeways. Wisdom says against a war machine on Tuesday, you stand no chance, but may we be the last poor people to play it safe. Cow's mouth on the flag. A politician raises his hand, and the crowd shows their teeth. An oligarch raises his hand, and little kids are not safe outside. You are high, depressed, and comrades and function. 15 minutes of closing in the city has survived another black rebellion. We just paying dues by trash fires not just anybody can set. And don't you love how deadly things whisper in the moment that people kill like feathers fall with everybody screaming inside? The writer knows that death is not a matter of dignity, rather humor. In the house it smells like roach races, nuclear percentages on torn stoves. Here life never was. Just lazy matches and manic inhumanity, hands rushing away from life towards stoves. What we doing here? Surviving for no reason in particular, because nobody gone far today. Nobody go far tomorrow. Trust me, hell and heaven cannot count. Strange gardens where secondhand clothes play, and concrete wishes to be human so that it could be accountable. Where they find you drenched, and drains wish to be human so that they could be worthy arms for you to die in. Hey, greet them all, grandson. Prepare for the day when every child is calm, and don't say we ghosts didn't write you a poem. Don't say we didn't dig your life. Remember the shotgun by the coat rack that everybody in the house knows how to use. Remember the tightrope made of needles for walking in between driveways and man-made best friends. Go ahead, grandson, tune this street again. Never mind, this country kills musicians first. Broken neck, night, scarred neck life. If these walls could write lyrics, they say, what's your angle? Angel eyes, 30, 50 rounds pass by on the street with no daughters. This street has no sons, just young prisoners of war in a racist city that means to make capital. And we know so much. We know it all. We were stood against walls. Who's on the third cross around here? Cow's mouth salivating over the street, and that is the story of why we aim at teeth. A tour guide through your robbery, they also are. Cigarette saying, look what I did about your silence. Ransom water and box spring gold, this decade is only for accent grooming, I guess. Ransom water and box spring gold, the corner store must die. War games, I guess. All these tongues rum is junk. The start of mass destruction begins and ends in restaurant bathrooms that some people use and other people clean. Are you telling me it's a rag in the sky? Waiting for you, yes. We've written a scene, we set a stage, we should have fit in. Warehouse jobs are for communists, but now more corridor and hallway have walked into our lives. Now the whistling is less playful and the barbed wire overcrowded too. My dear, if it is not a city, it is a prison. If it has a prison, it is a prison, not a city. When the courtyard talks on behalf of military issue, all walks take place outside of the body. Dear life to your left, a medieval painting to your right. None of this really makes an impression. Crop people living in thin air, you have 5 minutes to learn how to see through this breeze. When the mask goes sideways, barbed wire becomes the floor, barbed wire becomes the roof, 40 feet into the sky becomes out of bounds. When the mask breaks in half, mind which way the eyes go. You know they killed the world for the sake of giving everyone the same backstory. We watching Gary, Indiana fight itself into the sky. Old pennies for wind, for that wind feeling you get before the hood goes up and over your headache. Pennies that stick together, mocking all aspirations. Stuck together pennies was the first newspaper I ever read, along with the storefront dwelling army that always lets us down, where the Holy Spirit favors the backroom souls in a situation that offer 100 ways to remain a loser, souls watching a clock hoping their eyes don't lie to sad people. What was we talking about again? The narrator asked the graveyard, at 10 minutes flat, said the graveyard, the funeral only took 10 minutes. Man, never tell that to anyone again. You just gonna blame the 90s on me? All 30 years of them? Then why should I know the difference between sleep and satire? The pyramid of corner stores fell on our head. We died right away. That building wants to climb up and jump off another building. These are downtown decisions. Somewhere on this planet, it's August 7th, and we running down the rest thinking one more needs to come with me. Man, what evaporated on Earth so that we could be sent back down? Yeah, you can tell by my tires that not everybody who's driven with me is still alive. Also that I like my drinks neat, bottled, and in the bus stop. Also that we drown in precinct paper, department store, floor plans, and applications to the moon. And we can change the color of our snot from gifted to heart attack and tell you about ashes, but where all these angels coming from, smelling like the cigarette that fails, and why is the man on the safe side, these headlights freezing up? You got nothing to say at my funeral, I'll speak on your behalf. Heroin in my smile, mountain made a flatland robbery among some things on my mind. The last store run in the name of shared afterlife, Friday to the filter, I'm a tall tale on earth. But here's to that angel that never appeared to America, and the night a dog paddling and a batch of hangovers looking for him. You know, a lot wouldn't have lived this long. That's my humor when fences speak. On a pair of rambling dice that got unique tempers and young souls that say shut up about our city. Here title must crash over a coast, why lie? The streets teeth are in pieces. There's reservoir art on the faces of stragglers. There's sad news from back home that mean we have to grow up on his behalf. Stumble back to a car full of last stand. The truth is stale but still liquor. Mission Street would be proud of me. I'm a mural man, almost organized. Remember when my lungs would wake up last walking on morning if it was worth it, man? I'm 3 decades homeless. And reservoir art is all I ever see. And I'm 2,000 miles from my first fight. Maybe no one really survived. Maybe I wrote my first poem for no reason. Societies wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. Citizen testaments bent on offering me a nation of breadwinners to hold me back like it's the Brinks. I wrinkle the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence turned away from a podium into the reeds like God is a dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop balcony on my bedroom floor. You know they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you in your broken neck from their foolish euphoria. From the loyalty oath to their gray superstitions, loyalty oath to their agrarian reform, I return to my mother completely disrespected. For peeling the heat off of purgatory, they kill poets like me. Walk me away from my poems, never to be heard from again. In this final industrial complex of bloodlines picked through a sport and spiritual death of your devil at least half made, police become a pretty word. I'm reading a lynch mouth shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in the mirror, people. Tyranny against your chump change. You're a chump to be mocked even with a gun in your car. A cubit of needlework spelled tune for the proletariat, the relapse ministry. Talented people curled up in a fetal position next to a diamond, dying just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism. In a bouquet of surveillance cameras, in the poverty of God. New blue eyes, corpses of water, newly potted presidency. One big shiny coin if you're asking animated capitalism and other non-literal voids, killing is white freedom. The deification of hyphens, medicine bread and picture shows, great protesters in LA, guests of our ink, drop kicking roses in the graveyard. Hey, DC Mink like a stone torn in half, the pen advances. Despite CIA guideposts, despite non-African past and futures, a metaphorical but not surreal day in a horn-ridden life, horn player improvising king, like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself, a real hand sweeps the land of racism. May I return to the ground? May I make progress with the gun on our mother Emmanuel they put on music that evening? A swinging type body language for you to drink with fermented $5 bills. For your body language, some applause. My past stomach lining, neither a good thing nor a bad thing, like being psychic on the way to a lethal injection. It'll sit you down with Lady Day. Lady Day leading youth who surrender their souls to Africa too soon. Poly thought floating in the cup of water, she saved me. Accessing my stomach, accessing the love of the American lynched. Cold sleeves wooden avalanche into the wrist. Our mother Emmanuel, avalanche into the sharp keys. Pain, the deal you make with pain. A piano makes sense for them. Laying hands on the world gradually. Addressing the bending necks on the streets of the north. Travelers sailing in pain, repeating pain in the north. 10 trigger fingers on that piano if harmony would have me. Putting 100 fights on every direction offered her. Lady Day, leaning on trees again. Recruiting the countryside itself, saying lay your plant on this lightning, make your poems a corner pocket of men. I've greeted the blues itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet, killing without killing. Never mind this painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching. A crow's passing, good and dead by the afternoon. Thank you all. And now for Hector.
Setting the stage. Humbled by the intellect and spirit that was brought into this room this morning. It's unmatched. We don't get to see that every day. I feel honored and blessed. Muchas gracias, Maestro Tongo Eisen Martin. In the community where my family comes from, in central Mexico, that wasn't a dot on a map until Google discovered it. They didn't ask me my name. They asked me who I belonged to. And when that question was asked of me as a little boy, I knew the response that I needed to give, which was, I'm the grandson of María de la Luz Orozco de Flores, Ildefonso Flores Enriquez, Andrea Valdez Jara de Sánchez, and Guadalupe Sánchez. And by sharing my grandparents' names, they instantly knew who my parents were. Gaudencio Sánchez Valdez, Celina Flores Orozco. But more importantly, they knew what to expect of me in that moment. For if I didn't live up to that expectation, when there were no phones or texts, before I got home, I had been scolded 3 times. That's who I am when I wake up every morning before I offer my prayers. After that, I work with the National Compadres Network, and I proudly serve as the executive director of that organization. And I was invited here today to do a very sacred thing, and that is to acknowledge what is frequently referred to as a land acknowledgement. But that's only half of the story. Because before others arrived and the original people were here, it was a reciprocal relationship between the Ramatish, the Ohlone, the Mowiqua. It was reciprocal. The land had a relationship with those people, and those people had a relationship with the land. There was no, we associate this land to them, but I don't know if those original people would have said this was my land. It would be like saying it's my grandmother when she had 40 grandchildren. And so I want to do that in a good way and offer a little prayer for all of us that are here. The direction of the north is the direction of the people with snow on their roof, of the ancestors that came before us, the long talkers and the long walkers that discovered medicine and tried to share it with us. Whether we were good students that understood that medicine, we want to honor them, want to honor your ancestors and relations. May they come to this room and this convening with you so that their presence matches your intellect. For within their spirit, within their journey, within their teachings, we can improve what we think. Let's not leave them behind. Let's center them here today. Because in the direct opposite direction, in the direction of the south, is the reason that we're gathered here today. And that is the direction of the children that are with us and yet to arrive. Will what we do, what we think, what we feel, what we create, honor those children that are within our families, our communities, and will we say they are perfect and sacred just the way they are when they come into our lives? They don't have to be different. They don't have to change. They don't need to conform. They are sacred when they arrive, and it is our responsibility to feed that sacredness so that we can discover and help them discover the value of their truth and who they are. The next two directions are the ones that I'll say I struggle with the most because I was mistaught about these two directions. And that is the direction of the West and the water. It is said to be the direction of the feminine, the life-creating force that nurtures, that loves unconditionally. And the East, the direction of the fire, the direction of the masculine energy. And when I was a boy, I was told they were separate. And only till a maestra taught me that those two energies are within me. And the problem is when I get stuck, when I wish to only be in one dimension of who I am, I struggle in relationships that I have. It is incumbent upon me to share the discovery that I had, that the best days of my life as a father was when I sat in my feminine energy. And I want to thank all the women of my relations that cultivated and nurtured it until I rediscovered it. I also want to honor those men that I know in my relationships that struggled with the fire that they carried. Some of these men carried fire so hot, they singed and burned all of us that came near them. While there were others that knew how to regulate that heat to provide warmth and attract us so that we didn't get lost. So when we balance all these four directions, you and I together, in all our relations, those simple words that mean so much to all of us, I invite you to discover how you bring your energy, how you regulate your heat. Know when you turn it up and when it needs to be dialed down. But know that you carry that heat. And in the center, where it all began, Mother Earth, who has always provided to us everything we needed. Everything we needed comes from Mother Earth. And yet, we trounce and we stomp. Father, Son, that teaches us every day is a new opportunity to remake and redo. Rises in the morning and sets in the evening. And if we weren't good enough that day, tomorrow morning we can start anew. I want to thank all the people that are here. And I want you, as you walk around what we now call the county of San Francisco, that you think about the people that were in this land before those others arrived. That you think about the spirits that are still with us today. They're not gone. They're with us today if we accept the invitation for them to come in. It is yours. Steve?
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Who's in the room? What's your name? Aloha. Yeah, I didn't actually, you guys need more coffee. I said, who's in the room? Not where are you from, who's in the room? Just tell me your name. Tell me your name. Shakima, I heard Shakima. Yeah, Jasmine. All right, Where are you from? Where are you from, Hawaii? Where are you from? Let me hear you. Where are you from? Say it the way you say it at home. Frank Mirabal, where are you from, man? Yeah. All right. Oh, that's a long answer, bro. I'll see you after. Welcome, everyone. That was a powerful beginning, right? It's hard to follow so much wisdom. Man. But follow we will. So I'm Steve Patrick. I have the great privilege of being one of the leaders of the Forum for Community Solutions with a whole team of amazing folk. Where's that team? Let me just see the team over there. Where are you guys? Clock Tower's like, yeah, I'm here. All right. And I just want to welcome you as well to this convening. We didn't know it was going to happen. We weren't sure it was going to happen. I dressed like it was a Zoom meeting, right? You know, like, you can't tell from the top. Anyway, welcome everybody. And let's get to know each other, because one of the interesting things about these gatherings, and I don't know if this is the 14th, 15th, I don't know. If you count the virtual ones the last couple of years, it's getting up there. It's always a different group. There's always some mainstays, some diehards, and then there's some new energy. I hear you, Hawaii. And there's a whole mix. And whoever's in the room is who is in the room, but we want to optimize the connections and the learning. So please, before you leave your table this morning, find out who's with you if you don't know everybody there, and make those connections. That's so much of what this work is about. And, you know, I think one other thing we always try to do, because it's always such an eclectic mix of folk, is just kind of reflect on where we are and where we're headed as a network. And these are some hard times in the world, so much trouble in the world. And so we want to be able to lean on each other and support each other in this work. We have to carry some hope and optimism that together we can thrive. We will survive. Uh-oh. Jamil's not going to break into song, is he? All right. But together we can build something with young people at the center, and a future that reflects the kind of past and the history and the legacies that we just heard about or that were touched upon. But we're going to need to lean on each other and support each other. So you'll hear this from Monique, because I don't know how many times she already has said to me, like, oh my God, I think we overprogrammed it again. You know, we got to make sure people take breaks. So take care of yourselves. You know, do me a favor and go up to Monique and tell her what you skipped, so that she knows you're taking care of yourself, all right? Just be like, hey, Mo, I really wanted to go to that breakout with Arnold Chandler, but I skipped it, and I sat in the sun, and she'll love you for it. But seriously, self-care is important as we come together for the first time in a while. And then, you know, as we level set on where we're headed, I just want to kind of remind us that 5 years ago as a network, many folks came together over a year-long process to really address how we are going to hold systems accountable for metric impact, and the sort of 4 common metrics that this network agreed to measure ourselves by. And so as we do a lot of future grant making, we're going to revisit that and elevate that, because we want to drive towards impact. We want to create community as we drive towards impact. And so that's one of the level settings that's happened. You know, we've been responding to so much challenge and crisis that sometimes maybe we haven't paid enough attention to where are the young people and how are we connecting them to opportunity, and how are we measuring and tracking that. So in the coming years, there'll be more from us in support of that, and I just wanted to name that. And those 4 metrics that we agreed on as our North Star continue to be our North Star, and there is no shortcut to helping young people tap into their promise and potential and to opportunity. But there might be jet fuel on the journey to that North Star, and we've come to believe that that journey, that jet fuel is belonging and meaning and well-being and purpose. And if we don't make that the ingredients inside the systems and the structures and the narratives about who young people are today, we're not gonna create the future that we all dream about for ourselves and for the rising generation. And let's be clear, the young people are asking for it. They are looking around at what folks my age have offered up and saying, I don't think so. You know, there's got to be something better. And we have always talked about young people being the protagonists in their own narratives. But we haven't seen the way the public funds invest in young people, the way the systems and structures embrace or other young people. We haven't seen that. So we got to get beyond talking about young people being protagonists in their own narrative and boost that. And that's why we're going to focus in the future on centering belonging and meaning making and purpose in this work and supporting young people in that. And you know what? One of the first things Hector said about his own path was, in his home where he comes from, they would ask him who he belonged to, not what his name was. We want to see those kinds of questions in the pathways that young people find themselves in. And Tongo said something about the deal you make with pain. And so, right now, so many of us are making so many deals with pain. So many young people are trying to figure out a way to make a deal with pain. That is not right, I mean, there's gonna be struggle, and we gotta, resilience, we've talked about that, and grit and tenacity and all of that. But let's stop having so much pain in this world. Let's have lots more belonging and meaning. And so that's the kind of conversation we want to have together. That's the kind of change we want to see in the lived experience for and with young people. That's what we want the young people to teach us about. I'm looking at that table of young people over there saying, teach me. That's what we want this network to move the needle on when it comes to moving the needle on the 4 metrics that we all bought into many years ago. All right, I promise, belonging, meaning, well-being, purpose. I promise I won't talk about BMWP too much. Where's Jamil? Is he gonna say you down with BMWP? No. Thanks, Sherry. So lastly, in my welcome, I just want to do two shout outs. One is, I mentioned the whole team. At the closing, I want to say a little more about this incredible forum fam. But I want to recognize Monique Miles for her leadership in and in a minute, she'll come up and welcome y'all, and then the wisdom will come back. I'm like the hiatus between wisdom and wisdom. I'm like the break in between. But Monique's done an extraordinary job building this network, and obviously with many partners building this agenda. And it's a pleasure to watch her lead. And so I just wanted to acknowledge her. And then one of our speakers today, we got some powerhouse folk, but I just want to shout out Karen Pittman. Karen. And some of you might have been there when a few years ago we acknowledged Dorothy Stoneman, the legendary founder of Youth Build, who's done a lot to build the Opportunity Youth Movement. We kind of called her the godmother of the movement. Karen said it's okay to call her that too, and she is. So the theoretical underpinnings, if you believe in an asset strengths-based approach, if you've ever used the terminology of positive youth development, thank you, Karen Pittman, So in my own journey, we work together because, I've been working for a while, but we worked together on a lot of things over many years, and I know that were it not for Karen Pittman, I would still be thinking young people were a problem that needed to be fixed, right? Karen's now launched a whole new body of work because she is never going away, but she and Marita built an amazing organization, the Forum for Youth Investment. We'll get you their new website because there's already like 1,200 amazing tools and things to catch up with from what Karen and Marita are doing now. But I just think in this moment we want to honor the foundational underpinnings of what KP brought us. So thank you, Karen. All right, that's my welcome. For the record, I'm a minute early, so that many of you have heard me before. That doesn't happen all the time. And so without further ado, the leader of the Opportunity Youth Forum, Monique Miles. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna try it out one more time. Good morning, everyone. All right, thank you for the love. Thank you for the love. I want to say thank you to Tango. I want to say thank you to Steve. And then I want to tell you about Hector. Because when we were planning this convening, because it's been 2.5 years, this is where we were supposed to come before COVID. Hector asked this question, and you'll hear over the next day and a half that there have been several questions that have really centered the content we've designed for today and tomorrow. And one of those key questions came from Hector. And the question was, as you think about your time here at this convening, and for many of you, this may likely be one of the very first times that you are coming together with a large group for the very first time, right? Under COVID-19 protocols. And so his question was, as you think about what brought you out, what brought you here, the connections you wanted to make, the learning you wanted to do, the impact you wanted to achieve, the vision you hold in your heart for what your work will mean, the question Hector asked that I want to ask to everyone in this room today is, who do you dedicate your time to? Again, as you think about your learning, as you think about the vision, what you want your work to be, the impact, your legacy, who do you dedicate your time to? And as we are having conversations over the next couple of days, as you are meeting new people, I want to encourage you to turn to your neighbor and let them know, who is that person? Who is that person that has inspired your learning? Who motivates you not just to be your best self, but to manage the complexity of the challenges we face in service of the vision that we hold to advance equity and justice. And so, where I wanted to start is I wanted to share with you all exactly who I dedicate my time to. My time at this convening, and frankly, my lifetime commitment to doing this work, are both dedicated to my mom. Those close to me know that I was born to a single mother in Harlem, New York City, El Barrio, and I'm one of 5 children. And like my favorite hip-hop artist of all time, El Boogie, says, we didn't know that we were poor. In fact, one of my favorite poets, Nikki Giovanni, wrote, it only mattered that everyone was together and that you and your sister have happy birthdays and very good Christmases. And so as a child, I didn't understand being poor or low income. And by the time I understood it, and I mean by the time I understood the structural side of poverty, especially in light of my zip code and possible lifetime outcomes, it mattered that I was already on a particular path. And that path was only ever possible because of my mother, because of my mom's work, the labor of a Black woman. Her name was Teresa Mae Morris, and everyone called her Rita Mae. And this work, the vision of this network, is the vision that so many loving adults, hardworking parents, and families of many different types and constructs sow into every day as they work in service of and in partnership with young people. It's the vision that my mom was working toward. We are working toward a future that we may not see realized today in its entirety, but it's a future that is inclusive, just, and equitable. And a young Black girl from Harlem isn't just lucky, but so many young people, just like the young person I was then, can be connected to a path of purpose, a path of meaning, and can let their lives speak. Let their lives speak in ways that actively contribute to the vision of a more inclusive, just, and equitable future. So I say all of that to say that my time at this convening is dedicated to my mom, Mamacita. Thank you. And now, without further ado, I want to transition us into the plenary. However, before doing so, I need to say another welcome and do some very quick acknowledgments. I mean, we wouldn't be us without expressing some love and some appreciation, y'all. This is how we do, to the people who made this convening possible. So I'm going to say this again in case you weren't with us last night. I'm adding to the chorus of welcome to San Francisco. And I want to make sure that as part of this welcome, I also just acknowledge that all of us, we together, made it to May in the Bay. Woo! So please, in the spirit of joy and camaraderie that comes from being together in person, I need you to do something for me. I need you to turn to your neighbor on your left, look them in the eye, and I want you to say, I am so glad that you are here. All right. Give them some love. Give them some love. Give them some love. Give them some love. But here's the most important part. Turn to your right, turn to your other neighbor and say, and I am glad that I am here too. That's right, because you here. Let them know, and I am here too. I am glad that I made it here today too. Yes. That's right. We are here, gathered together in this place, and that matters, y'all. It matters that in spite of all the things, we are able to be gathered here together in this place, and we are fired up and we're ready to go. So I'm gonna call up our esteemed speakers in one moment, but I do want to also add to the acknowledgments of our team because, as Steve said, this was not an individual journey, and I want to call them by name. Thank you again to Steve, to Yelena, Jamil, Bakhtower, Mike, Nanette, Juan, Ken, Tracy, Frank, Cindy, Jamie, Tim, Joelle, Hannah, Ben, Laura, Andrea, Janine. Give them some love, y'all. I want to thank Aspen Conference Services, and most importantly, I want to thank our partners in San Francisco and Oakland. Thank you, David Harris, and special thanks to Ricardo, Dr. Davis, and Ruth Barajas for opening your networks and opening your heart to us. This convening reflects the wealth of their relationships and their deep and abiding commitment to this work. And finally, I want to thank all of our partner communities across the state of California, including our partners in Los Angeles, Del Norte, Oakland, San Jose, and San Diego. Thank you. All right. So now I want to turn our attention to this plenary. And what I want to do, because as I said, we've been planning this for 2.5 years. So I want to just share a little bit of what we have been, and it's particularly what I have been thinking about in terms of what is the best way to introduce leaders who are so transformative, so impactful, that their work speaks for itself. And in so many ways, an introduction of these leaders feels insufficient because their bios are long and impressive, yes, but the mark of their leadership is far and wide. It stretches back into the past and blazes a trail into the future. So it's important to know that we're going to hear from Karen Pittman, the former co-founder of the Forum for Youth Investment and current partner at KP Catalyst. We're going to hear from Kim Pham, the Opportunity Youth United Engagement Coordinator, and we are going to hear from the one and only Reverend Starsky Wilson, President and CEO of the Children's Defense Fund. But it's even more important to know that future generations will look to the work of these leaders, their transformational impact, and say things like, Dr. Wilson's work clarified my vision of the type of community leadership and community change that leads to a more inclusive democracy. They will say things like, I didn't have the words to articulate positive youth development, and then I came across the scholarship of Karen Pittman, and I finally had the language to bring people together to transform systems. And for our beloved Kim, what they will say is Kim's leadership in the community was like a lamp. It was like a roadmap. It helped me find my dream and forge a path that no one in my immediate circle was on, and I'm here today because of Kim. So please join me in welcoming these leaders to the stage. Come on, y'all. Come up here and join me. And as they're heading up here, I just want to tell you quickly what we're going to do together. They are going to do some brief TED Talks, sharing some of their personal and professional journey, and also, of course, their vision for how we continue to build toward a more inclusive, equitable, and just future. And then most importantly, we're going to have a dialogue together and with all of you in the room. So I say that to say, thank you for opening your hearts, thank you for opening your minds, and thank you for being on this journey with us. I'm excited to get started, and I want to now turn this podium over to Karen.
Good morning. This is my first time being out among real people in a conference setting. It was my first time getting on a plane in 2.5 years. So I'm excited to be here. I'm also excited to be here because, and people keep asking me, do I want to stand? I'm also excited to be here because 2 months ago, I had a stroke. But luckily, my husband was there to literally catch me as I fell over. And so while I'm recovering, I'm still able to talk. And I don't know what I could do if I couldn't talk. So I have been, as you heard, promoting the ideas of youth development for more than 50 years. And this is my personal meaning-making journey. For 50 years, I've been trying to convey the tenets of youth work and move them into practice and policy and public psyche. And that started before I even knew what youth work was. So I want to start by reading to you the most recent explanation of why we need to think differently about how to change the odds for success for young people who have the odds really stacked against them, individually and collectively, and why we cannot continue to be satisfied we've only helped a small percentage of young people beat the odds, rather than changing our systems, our ideas, our understanding of what needs to happen so that we can help all young people by changing the odds. So I'm going to read a paragraph to you that I wrote a couple weeks ago. It's probably the 100th paragraph I've written to try to get this right. It still needs work, but Marita said it was okay to read it. And I trust her. Strategies aimed at improving the success and thriving of youth, especially those identified as belonging to a marginalized racial, ethnic, or income group, tend to be focused on increasing the capacity and motivation of the individual, rather than on identifying and addressing the visible and invisible differences in opportunity. Changing the odds that all youth will be successful requires a radical shift in assumptions. We must have a laser focus on increasing opportunities rather than fixing individual kids and families, even when there is evidence of individual challenges that are linked to inequitable past experiences. This shift requires coordinated community action to incentivize public and private systems to see their staff and their resources as part of a broader learning and development ecosystem committed to youth success. It's neither possible nor useful for me to walk you through my life, even though I enjoy doing it, so find me afterwards. But since I've now got 5 minutes left, what I want to do is quickly tell you that there's a through story that links the personal to the professional for me, that accounts for my ability to be persistently optimistic and simultaneously outraged for 5 decades without giving up, and I still have another decade in me, I hope. So it starts, thank you. My passion started with getting a great education in the DC public schools in the 1950s and 60s, when they weren't very good, supposedly. But I was lucky enough to be a part of a program that was an experiment, frankly, to address white flight and bring people back into the schools that had left. And that experiment led DC to identify and design whole schools that brought young people from all over the city, all 9 wards, together, all backgrounds, all intellects, all capacities, into something that was a community in which everybody needed to be empowered and engaged. It brought together an incredible set of teachers who looked like us to do this work with us. And I was proud to be a part of it, but I also didn't know that it was something special, because by doing this, they had changed the odds, not just for me, but for everybody. I didn't know they were beating the odds for me specifically, because they had put things together to change the odds. And not just during the school year, after school and year-round, by creating opportunities as the school system to make sure that we always had what we needed. So when I went off to college, to Oberlin College, I figured I was well prepared. I had good SAT scores, I had good grades, and I felt well prepared for college. And I was surprised when I showed up, and subtly but surely, peers and professors seemed surprised that I was as well prepared as I was, because they read me from a zip code. They looked at me as a poor black kid that a little skinnier, from a single parent family, and they said, wow, we knew she was bright, but we thought we were going to have to do work to fix her. And we didn't have to do that work, because of the experiences that I had, because I had the good fortune of having experienced a system that had decided it needed to really embrace and understand the full ecosystem of what I had to offer and what was in my community. And that system was the schools during the day, it was the DC Youth Orchestra in the summers and the afternoons and evenings, and it was my church, and they all fit together in a wonderful way. So that experience of having my ability questioned, being seen as the exception rather than the rule, got me thinking, how was it that I was able to get this experience when so many others couldn't? And that question has just guided me for 50 years, to figure out how it is that we can really convince systems that their job is not just to help some kids, but help all kids. How it is that we can convince systems, especially the systems where our young people come because something has happened, but including the system where young people go because they're required, that system called school. How can we convince them that at the first sign of weakness, they can't assume that there's nothing else going on in young people's lives? They can't assume that there are no other assets in their families and communities. They can't assume that it's their job alone to fix them. So if they do the best they can and they don't see all the progress, they don't help young people achieve their full potential, that they did the best they can. They didn't. They can't. Because as soon as we disregard or disrespect the communities that our young people come from, we are not going to succeed. So I want to make sure that you understand that I didn't come here just to be honored. I came here to honor you. Because what we know is that community programs are a part of a larger ecosystem in which public systems operate. Public systems don't always know that, but we know that. The elements in this ecosystem interact and influence each other, but it's not the way they do in formal systems. Formal systems have a very structured architecture in which everything fits together. There are policies and practices put in stone that help them function regularly, that help them be reliable, but they don't help them be flexible. They don't help them be opportunistic. They don't help them be the agile systems that young people need. They don't help, even if they have people in them, which they all do, even if they have and own and support places, which they all do, even if they claim to support young people getting particular possibilities in front of them, which they're required to do to make sure that they use their resources to create educational possibilities, employment possibilities, health possibilities. With all of that, what they don't do is recognize the need for flexibility, for adaptability, for humility, and for starting with the idea that young people have assets and it's our job to stand behind them, not pull them along. Because you all understand that community programs are a part of this larger ecosystem, even though they aren't always recognized and visible. Because you all have figured out what it takes to create collaboratives, to create networks that support this, you are being the front edge, the vanguard of a movement that says local collaboratives are the way to bring visibility, accountability, investment, quality, scale, services alignment, and youth engagement to these elements as a group so that they can better interact and influence the public systems through policy advocacy and through issue reframing. And I know that you all do all this, not because I know some of you personally, but because if you look at the things that were up on the screen as you were coming in, those are the things that you all are holding yourselves accountable for as collaboratives. And those are the things that you've had success in over the past 10 years. Of all of the things that were on that list, the most important one is the last one, issue reframing. And Steve said this and Monique said this. We are not going to change systems if we don't take the time to change their understanding of who youth are, who the adults are who work with them, and who communities are. If we don't take the time to do meaning making, not just help young people make meaning, but help us make meaning of why we are doing the work we're doing. Help us make meaning of the barriers, and help us have the courage to stand up and collectively address those barriers together. We can all give ourselves credit for helping individual young people beat the odds. But if we're going to change the odds, we have to change the systems. If we're going to change the systems, we have to work together as collaboratives, as networks, to be the stealth strategy that is the Trojan horse that gets inside of systems. I'm more excited about our opportunity to do this, to actually achieve this goal, than I have been in the 50 years that I've been having these conversations with anybody who would listen. And the reason I'm so excited is that what COVID did was to speed up a process that was happening in the most important but most rigid institution that we have, public schools. And the walls softened with public schools. And community organizations stepped up as schools closed, as out-of-school time became all the time. We stepped up and showed what we could do, not just around the edges, but showed what we do when we are fully embracing young people. And showed what we do when we embrace young people who hadn't been in school, but still needed our services and our supports. The walls are hardening again as we come out of the pandemic, or at least are exhausted enough that we have to pretend that there's no pandemic. And as those walls begin to harden, it's our job to be on the inside this time. It's our job not to get locked out and say it's too hard to be in the schools. Because there really are 4 kinds of systems, 4 kinds of organizations in this country that support young people. We have our public schools, which are supposed to be about learning and development, but are mandatory. We have a whole set of community organizations, from youth organizations and after-school programs and libraries and museums and leadership programs and youth organizing programs that are supporting young people voluntarily to come in and be of service and learn and be of service to their communities. We then have another quadrant of organizations that provide basic services: healthcare, mental health care, housing, financial aid. And there's a big barrier there. Those services, those public systems only come in place when people can't afford to buy the private systems. So we know that when young people are involved in any of those public systems, the likelihood that they are also involved in a quality education, likelihood that they're also getting all the community supports they need, goes down. And then finally, we have law enforcement. We have the place where nobody wants their kids to be, but often they are required to be involved in the justice system. So if we are going to really support all young people, if we're going to get to a point where we're talking about changing the odds, we're talking about equity, the secret sauce is up in that community quadrant, where voluntary youth work, and that's voluntary not because we're volunteering, although we always volunteer much more than we are paid for, but it's voluntary because young people choose to be in it. They're not required to be in it. And when young people make the choice to work with us, we have a greater opportunity to work with them, to stand with them, to stand up for them, to stand up behind them, to help them move forward. I learned a lot when I was spending time in other countries, especially the Commonwealth countries, as a part of the International Youth Foundation. And the tenets of youth work that are baked into public policy in countries like England and Wales and South Africa and New Zealand, they talk about 5 pillars of youth work. And those pillars are that the youth workers and the youth work profession is not dedicated to specific outcomes for young people. It's dedicated to creating environments that are empowering, that are participatory, that are expressive, that are educative, and that are inclusive. That's your job. That's their job. And that is what we need to get inside of systems, that belief, that understanding that if we don't, as Steve said, center belonging and meaning-making and purpose, we're not doing our jobs. So I thank you because you are the people who are helping young people, have places, have possibilities that are suited to their needs, that are allowing them to build their potential, and that are giving them the space they need to talk, to lead, and to learn. And that's really why I'm here to be with you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kim, for the opportunity to be with all of you and to be with all of you. I don't like podiums much, but it's a good place to put my phone to remind me when 8 minutes is up. So I'm going to do that. Karen's been having this conversation for 50 years. One of the places, this is the power of movement, which is what I want to talk about. One of the places she helped to build for these conversations was the Children's Defense Fund. Powerful movements inform, shape, glean, and send people forth into powerful work. Marion Wright Edelman, our founder 50 years ago of the Children's Defense Fund, engaged deeply with Karen in the way that she engaged deeply with me. And Karen saw a path to create spaces for so many more of us in a different way in the work. She went and she built that space, and we are all the better for it. And I'm grateful for what she has built. And I only pray that some decades from now, I might be able to say that I have done a fraction of what she has done in a manner to honor her work. Thank you very much. I want to talk about one of the things they built that mattered at a particular moment in my life when I didn't know that they were building. When I was engaging in that privileged aspect of life development called adolescence, that was created some 65 or so years ago, scholars suggest, in the interest of providing a new privilege to white children to make mistakes, but is consistently taken and held back from black and brown children who are still in those formative years, sent forth into adult systems. When I was an adolescent, I claim it because they wouldn't give it to me. When I was an adolescent, I wrestled with the death of my youngest uncle, murdered 3 blocks from my grandmother's house, and the murder. They say officially it was a mass murder because 4 people were killed at the same time, of my brother, south 4 blocks in the other direction. And at that time, when I was trying to figure out what to do with myself and how to make meaning of the reality of my existence, when I was growing up in a household led by a single mom, the power of black women is a whole thing,
Say
y'all.
it, say it, say it, say it, say it, Starsky.
Dealing with community violence, also wrestling with something else that was a thing at the time that we don't talk about in the same way. 2 sisters who had children before they had graduated from high school. And the systems that were not quite prepared for me and did not like me. They didn't know me, but clearly they didn't like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
As I was trying to figure out what to do with all of that, going to the counselor at school after I came down from getting drunk at school before school, somebody was building something for me. In the 1990s, that 30-year decade that was aforementioned, the Children's Defense Fund built something called the Black Community Crusade for Children. Out of it came the network of CDF Freedom Schools with culturally relevant teaching that's happening at 172 sites across the country this summer. Wrestling with the reality that social emotional wellness is still a thing, no matter what they say in Florida and in Texas, where I grew up, in the legislatures in those places, that culturally relevant pedagogy is not critical race theory, and we still need to be able to tell the truth about who we are.
Say it, say it.
CDF was building in the Black Community Crusade a thing called the Black Student Leadership Network. A short-lived effort of about 7 years where hundreds of young people across the country were trained in public policy work, trained in organizing and community power, and sent forth to develop within their communities answers to the same issues that were surrounding my life, empowered to do so until it ran up against the agenda of the generation before, who decided that they wanted to control and put those young people into their issues on their agenda to turn out for their programs. That was a critical and powerful moment for me because movements of young people create accountability for systems to respond to the life circumstances of young people who do not know they exist until the 30 years later when they meet people who helped to build that system.
Right, that's right.
And this matters. This matters because I sat through the court case. I sat through the murder trial of the 2 men who took the life of my brother. And I saw in that courtroom an image of my brother lying in a kitchen in his own life force. And I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know why I saw that. And I was too young to see it, and I could not put the pieces together until 2014. When I saw the images on social media of Michael Brown Jr., 18 years old, lying in the midst of his own life force for 4.5 hours as his mother, weeping, tried to get to his body. And then I understood why the Great Tribulation, why the trauma. Because traumas of our times and our lives meet moments when meaning can come forth, and we need folks to help us to understand them.
That's right.
And it was the community of young people who gathered around Mike. Those who had heard the American ideals that if you defer gratification and you get an education and you put off certain things until you have graduated, then you can do better than your parents. They heard that, but they saw Mike and understood that it was a lie. That they were the most educated generation in American history, and they had followed all the rules, and some of them were in school nearby, University of Missouri, St. Louis, and they said, if this is our future, and it could be no matter what we are doing, then we've got to do something different. And they helped me to understand something different, Steve. But I had to stop long enough to listen. Young people have the capacity to arrest our development in a moment so that we can experience the disequilibrium of the time and then learn new things. And what they taught me between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning as I sat trying as a clergy person to protect them with a clerical garb, my presence in front of police and behind tear gas, was that ultimately they're the ones in charge, and my job is to make sure that they have the space to do it. And so when that fourth estate of law enforcement, you said it better, it ain't criminal justice. It ain't really making us safe. But those who came to enforce the rules that it was time for people to go inside, over against young people who had declared publicly that we will not go inside until someone gives us some answers. When they came to me, the recognized clergy person who was pastoring a church and the leader of a philanthropy who the mayor had on speed dial, because, you know, when you have millions of dollars, people we have access. It wasn't my money. When you have access to millions of dollars, people want to listen to you, or at least feign listening to you. When the chief of police out on the line with his hundreds of officers wanted to make people go inside, he decided to appeal to me. He decided to attempt to use me, the arbiter and gateway to financial resources, me, the one who represented the establishment church, me, a recognized leader in the black community who had just enough dark suits, white shirts, and ties to be accepted as respectable by white establishment. He asked me to ask them to go inside, and I found out that moment what my job was, my vocation in life. My desired outcome, my ultimate end of the logic model, my responsibility in the world. It is to take the privilege that I've been given, the access to resources, to create the appropriate space for young people. And I said to Chief Dotson, I'm going to say his name every time I do this, just to make him famous. I said, Chief Dotson, it's not about me. You need to talk to them. This, my friends, shall be our salvation. I'm a preacher, but I shouldn't talk about salvation in this regard, except to say, if we will be the America that we have said we will be, then democracy is not to be somehow reproduced. Democracy can not be reinforced. Democracy, Langston Hughes said it this way, he's from Missouri, America never was America to me. And so just like those young people who said that this idea of America has never been for us, it was not for Mike, and it shall not be, it must be raised over a new and true generation. Raised, I say very intentionally, using the language of child development. It will take 25 years, an investment of a generation in order to do something different. Raised because it will come through this first multicultural, multiracial generation. Raised because it is up to the 74 million young people under the age of 18 in America who are predominantly black and brown and give us for the first time the opportunity to live into King's beloved community. It must be raised, but it must also be rooted. Rooted in a new and true narrative about who America is, who our children are, and who we have been. Rooted in a true story of all our faults and our foibles, our issues and our problems in order to be held accountable. Rooting in a cultural narrative gives us the right stuff to make meaning. But then it has to be re-envisioned. It has to be re-envisioned by those of you who we create the space for, not because we have so much power, but because we have been given positional capacity and authority. And now we've got to learn what to do with it. It's our job to use it to create space. Why? Because the moral authority to design the future. I said that wrong. The moral authority to define, maybe that's not right. Spiritual people. The moral authority to divine the future lives with those who will live in it the longest. And so we're not going to figure this out. You are. It's our job to create space. That's why we are here. That's my vocation. That's my charge. That's my introduction. And I'm looking forward to seeing what y'all do.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to both Karen and Reverend Starsky. That was so powerful. Just bringing the role of movements, the role of systems, and the important role that they play in our lives. I want to say thank you to the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions for having me. It is an honor to bless this space and this stage with you all. Two elements I would like to bring into the room is unconditional love and reciprocity. And if it's not in you, please bring that within that space. It's so important. Our young people need unconditional love. We all need it. Love with no boundaries. Thinking back to when I made a commitment to me about transformation. Transformation meant beyond the surface, before the work in the community. I had to work on me. Like most of us today, we are still a work of art, mentally and physically. It's so much people don't see. Even today, I still see my city in flames, with gun violence and drug addiction. On one side of gentrification, people see opportunity. I just want my community to see the same beauty. There is an opportunity for us all. I show up with my biggest heart and clearest mind, welcoming the idea of community seeing and feeling liberation and justice. The road less traveled was quite more occupied than I thought. I stand here with so many individuals and communities who have been tackling issues of oppression and struggles prior to the pandemic. Pushing through has been a silent mantra for centuries. Pushing through racism, poverty, and this pandemic, we rose to the occasion, exposing more trauma and hurt to our communities, continued Black and brown bodies dying at the hands of C-19 and police brutality. Even though we cry, how many more? We still stand creating songs for the movement, feeding and healing our communities with essentials. We put the power in the stimulus. We have been stimulating our communities far too long with very little. The way youth and adults work to ensure our communities were educated and encouraged during a global health crisis was powerful. We stood up, y'all stood up together. Youth and adults showed up to protect our democracy in search of a freedom that so many won't get a chance to see. Last few years have been crazy. When you look up, all you see is the media trying to hurt me or the ones closest. Gun violence and drugs continue to plague our low-income communities. How can we focus on getting a vaccine? How do we tune out fake from reality? How do we celebrate biggest voter turnout in history, first Black Asian woman VP? The fight for human rights will be a continuous journey in this country. I know with the strength and energy of the youth, we will see some victory. They are dreaming hard awake, chanting, saying her name, cancel student debt, protect our bodies, and so much more. Teaching and helping us to grow, to understand the only way we want to see the change is to be the change, bring that change. And we are bringing that change everywhere we go. Reform and rebuild. 10 years in this space have been full of triumphs, as much trial as there can be with trying to reconnect millions of opportunity youth across the country. Building an intergenerational movement with youth at the lead and center has been inspiring and hopeful. Even with the ever-changing environment, this network still holds on to hope. Hope is what keeps us excited and humble. We know it ain't right, but we have the opportunity to fix it. Challenging the culture to value youth as experts and professionals. Seeing young people beyond a testimony. Exposing them to a culture where agency and advocacy matters. A space where disconnection brought us together, but the idea of bettering communities for the betterment of livelihoods keeps us here. A space where the obvious is a lot of us don't look the same, but our care does. Using this space as a tool and a platform to create change. Having consideration for equity and justice to be values has allowed us to invite understanding for diversity and its need. Learning allyship. How do we stand for others, even if we're not going through it? Opportunities to dissect words of defunding, decolonizing, and liberation into space. Deep dialogue of current events. Understanding our roots and how we are all grounded by the same lands. Building power by connecting and being present to listen and learn. Adults not only listen, but use their power to support the ideas of the youth who actually experience these challenges every day. Moving with purpose and power with the complements of knowledge and wisdom. This space has allowed my mind and my body to be nourished. Some of us may come here today thinking that progress has been stalled with the pandemic, passing and exhausting the number of people experiencing disconnection. Progress is a gear that is always going as long as we choose to show up. Love you. You showed up today. We use this time to reconnect, heal, and celebrate the work that has been done and what is yet to come. When we show up, we give hope that human rights, civil rights, liberation, and healing is worth showing up for. The work that we do here gives people the ignition to believe in intergenerational change, intergenerational hope and healing, and unconditional love. Thank you to this entire network for dedicating their time and energy and sacrifices, and to the ones that we don't see here. Our support and our foundation back home, whether if it's your kids, your family, your fictive family, your friends, your community, we appreciate them. They ground us and are a source support for refueling us while we do this work. Welcome back, everyone.
All right, all right. Join me one more time to give it up for our speakers, please. So I feel like the design was just, it was just so baked into the different pieces that we heard from each of the speakers, right? You know, the foundation that Karen built, Starsky in such a passionate, eloquent way, putting it into the context of his experience at Deaconess and understanding in that moment with Michael Brown exactly what his purpose was. And that is living into the foundation that the people who come before you have built that help you tap into meaning and purpose that then becomes part of what you do for the next generation, right? This frame Starsky offered us of being rooted and raised. And so the types of roots, foundational roots that Karen built, how those roots were able to seed the exact experiences, particularly on the professional side, that helped to cultivate the type of leader that Dr. Wilson is. And then how in his purpose, in his meaning, in Karen's purpose, in her meaning, they are able to raise up and pour into the next generation of the type of leadership we get to hear about from our Kim Pham. So I say that to say, not only thank you for being able to so eloquently paint this picture of how our work is at its core fundamentally about building. And we may not always necessarily know and understand in a fulsome way not just the purpose of what we are building, but the type of impact, generational impact, the types of spaces, as Dr. Wilson called us to do, we are creating for the next generation. But I say that to say, I'd love to, where I want to start this conversation is, I really want to invite each of you to share, as you heard from Kim, as you heard from Dr. Wilson, I keep wanting to say Starsky. As you heard from Dr. Wilson. Okay, all right. As you heard from Starsky. And Starsky, you did this in many ways, but as you heard from Karen and as you heard from Kim, what's sitting with you? What resonated? What's top of heart and top of mind as you think about the power and connection between your work, your life, your legacy, and the spaces it continues to create for the next generation?
That's a long question. For me, and I had it as part of the notes, but 8 minutes isn't very long, I want to come back to both honor and acknowledge the role that Marian Wright Edelman had in helping me pivot from being a researcher to being an advocate. And she did that in 2 ways. One, she did it when she decided to hire me at 7 months pregnant to ironically be the head of the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Division at CDF. Now, I wasn't an adolescent when I was pregnant by any means, but I always remember her essentially saying, we've hit a tipping point where more than 50% of the births to Black women, period, are out of wedlock, and we're pushing 90% of the births to Black teens are out of wedlock. And we need, she didn't quite use this word, but we need to change the narrative on why that is.
Yeah.
Contraceptives is important, but that's the easy part of the solution. We need to get people understanding why this is the problem that it is and what it's going to take to do it. And I need somebody who is going to be able to talk to the health people, talk to Planned Parenthood, but not be of them. And so that was a pretty enormous task that she gave me. And it just turned out that I was able to talk and convince and get people to make meaning about this. And we talked about capacity and motivation and opportunity and how we often misinterpret behavior because we assume that when we see behavior we don't like, it's because either the individual doesn't have the capacity or they're not motivated. We don't assess the opportunity. And so I get an incredible opportunity for 7 years at CDF to go around and look at programs across the country that were working on this and recognize that what they were doing was not just preventing a problem. They were building resources, building capacity, making space for young people to address their own problems in multiple ways.
Yeah.
And so I would just say that as Starsky honored me, I would like to honor Marian.
Yeah. I could feel how moved you are by everything that Karen shared, so I really want to come to you next, Starsky.
No, I mean, again, I actually didn't know that was Karen's specific assignment, right? So I was thinking about my sisters, who Karen was serving in that assignment. And I was also thinking about me getting my assignment, but I didn't work for Marian. I was out here, but this is how I got my assignment. So I think these things are important.
Yeah.
Learning to listen. So in the moment of the Ferguson Uprising, I was also called to be a co-chair of a commission that was established by the governor in order to respond to these matters. Mostly, you know what commissions do in the context of what people call riots and uprisings. They calm people down. So he wanted us to go calm people down. So we created a space to listen to folks and hear what they had to say. And in that, some people honored our work for that. And then some people appreciated what we were doing with young people. What was most important for me was that young people were creating tension still out in the streets in order to give that work purpose. In that context, I was asked to bring a group of young people. Some clergy came to St. Louis. They listened to what we had to say as clergy, and then they asked us to come be a part of a thing in DC. And I decided I don't want to come unless I can bring some young people. And so we brought 10 young people to a stage full of clergy from across the country and let them talk. And at the end of that talk, Dr. C.T. Vivian, the late Dr. C.T. Vivian, sent for me, as elders and ancestors do.
Yes, right.
He sent for me.
You get sent, yeah.
Sat me down at his table next to him and asked me questions about what was going on. And I didn't move. I refused to move. I sat next to him all day. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't go get no water. I just sat next to him all day. At the end of the day, Marian gave a keynote. And at the end of her keynote, they embraced. At the end of their embrace, she invited him to come have dinner, He invited us, everybody at the table, to come and have dinner. We had dinner. At the end of the night, she asked, what are y'all doing tomorrow? We knew that she was about to tell us what to do tomorrow. The next morning, we got up and sat with all of the interns for CDF, right? Listening to young people, had me honored by an ancestor, now an elder, brought into room to receive direction from another elder in this work. Listening to young people is how I came into this work. And at the end of that conversation with young people, she began to tell me what I need to go back to St. Louis and do. And so this connection of listening to those in the South, Hector says, to honor those from the North,
Yes.
and finding ourselves situated in between is the journey of movement, it seems to me. And we come to know why along the way.
Yeah.
While I was doing all that in St. Louis, what Ferguson interrupted for me was 2 years worth of organizing to try to get funders to understand the Forum for Youth Investments Cradle to Career Initiative and pipeline work.
Right.
Trying to get them together, trying to get the system people together. And all of a sudden, all hell's breaks loose on the street.
Yeah.
So we got them there. And some of this is because, I'll close with this, my understanding, Dennis Dickerson wrote a book about Whitney Young called Militant Mediator. It's a biography. It's understanding that you only get a Whitney Young, the leader of the National Urban League, empowered to do the things that he can do because you have a Stokely Carmichael and a Kwame Ture,
That's
who
right.
funders are scared of. A Martin Luther King, who now we honor, who people were afraid of.
Right.
So they resourced the National Urban League and they resourced Whitney Young as the mediator, but he had to understand his purpose as related to them.
That's exactly right.
And so in as much as that space was created, we understood our purpose to create a translating opportunity. And so young people were the Stokeleys and the Kwames and the MLKs.
Yes.
And we got to play in the middle Whitney Young as an opportunity to translate and invest resources in our community. And what's critical for this, for me it seems, is to make sure that we don't ever castigate one over the other, because this invested, supported systems work needs the movement work to hold folks accountable to invest in it. And this, right, these kinds of relationships have made that really key for me. And so I just try to live into it in the interest of those who come forth with me, right?
I love that. I love that. And Kim, I really want to bring you into this conversation, but the thing I want to lift up very quickly, Starsky, is being proximate to the past and holding that wisdom and connection while you are also envisioning and actively organized to shape the future. But that role of where you sit in the middle and how proximate you are to the past while also trying to actively shape the future. That's what I hear you talking about as we think about how do you continue to advance this movement. Come on, Kim.
Sitting in between two powerful people who lead powerful structures is important, right? I think there are a lot of different structures within these systems. And we don't have enough powerful leaders like you all leading different structures, or maybe these structures need to improve, quite frankly. It's a lot that needs to happen, you know, and it's a continuous journey, hearing like the things that needed to happen, those things that happened back in the day needed to happen. And even though we lost a lot of great leaders in the movement, and we're gonna continue to lose a lot of great people in the movement, the fight is going to be long. I mean, I just came back from a trip in Spain and, you know, revisiting the history of colonization and things like that, learning we've been fighting different wars for so long. Just important to just be grounded, you know, and understanding where we come from and why we are in this fight and why everybody is playing different roles, you know. So I think just the importance of respecting where everyone's coming from, the importance of listening, and people seeing not only past your, like not only seeing your potential, but just seeing you and seeing you for who you are in that moment of deserving. Because you sit between people and you think like, oh, these people they are powerful, but at some point, somebody didn't believe in them.
Yeah.
Hearing Karen's story, like just overachieving and all of this, and still someone trying to marginalize what you should be or what you should do. And hearing someone thinking to themselves like, hey, let me talk to her, let me share some thoughts, and opening that door for using her skill of research to advance a space around advocacy. You know, so I think the importance of, like I said, unconditional love and reciprocity, right? We don't know who is in the room. A lot of young adults, we come into this space like a little bit fearful, scared. It's unfamiliar for us. A lot of unfamiliar faces, powerful people with titles and things like that. But I'm only standing on this stage because of so many different people who believed in me.
Yeah.
Like literally. A lot of people have been seeing me getting love and all of that. That love was built over time. And it became unconditional. Let me tell you, we all got to work on it. Trust me, we got some biases, you know, so we got to be real about it. But when you see a person for a person, you know, like, yo, we all go through things. We all coming from different places and spaces. And once again, like, if you have that power to make a difference, like even hearing the Reverend say, like, it was my duty to listen, use my role to use my power to say, yo, I need these young people here. Because people respect him. They don't know why, but they're gonna understand why. You know, and I think it took me a while to truly understand that it's not happenstance, it is divine. Right? Like, earlier, I seen Hector walking, and he was looking like, how do I get down here? And I'm in my mind like, you know, I'm social, but I'm a little antisocial too. So I'm like, should I tell this person, like, this is how you get down there? Not even recognizing this is a fellow speaker too, you know? And I happened to share with him, you know, like, how you get down here. And with Divine, we connected on a real cultural root level. You know, I'm still learning about me. I'm just like getting connected to my my dad's side of the roots, like I was sharing with Hector. Like, you know, I'm learning that I'm Honduras, and what does it mean? Like, what is the makeup of Honduran blood and the whole African diaspora, and the role of us understanding where we come from and how we all are connected. But yeah, that's just some of my thoughts on, you know, everything is divine. Just reaffirming what was said.
So I want to turn to the audience. I think that we have time. I'm hoping for at least 2 questions. So I'm looking around the room to see, all right, okay, I see a hand already right up here in the front. Thank you.
Good morning. My question is for Karen, who started out talking about learning in spaces outside the classroom. And I'm wondering if you could recall those skills that you might have picked up outside of the classroom, especially thinking church or after-school programs.
Absolutely. I actually had the fortune to have people inside and outside the classroom understand all the skills that are needed. So in this case, it was the exception. But what we know is that learning is social emotional. We know that cognitive skills are important, but are not just used for academics. Cognitive skills are important for success in all places. And the formal classes that I had had teachers that took the time. They really took the time because they were empowered to do it. As I say, because they were told, your job is to make sure every kid that comes through this school is successful. Take the time to do it. I was in schools that rearranged the class schedule. I was in schools, I was in 4th through 6th grade with 1 teacher. People were breaking the rules of what school looked like in order to make sure young people were successful. But that even more flexible school was supplemented by extracurricular activities that, while they were school-based, gave us even more flexibility to be expressive, to find ourselves, to lead, to show our competencies in ways that were meaningful to people. And then I continued to do that in the summer and the after-school setting through the DC Youth Orchestra, which was a public program. I can say right now that one of the things that concerns me when we talk about school and after school, and we have this line between them, this is what happens in school and it's all academic, and they should go to the after-school programs for all the social emotional stuff, is that if you're in a family that can't afford those programs, if you're a kid that has to babysit for your little sisters and brothers, that isn't an option for you. We need that to happen during the school day. We need that to be a part of what it is. So after-school programs are important, but my preference is that we call them community programs, and that we talk about community educators who first and foremost have the job of not just teaching kids specific academic competencies, but developing that sense of engagement and relationships that allow them to see themselves as productive, healthy members of the community. So that's really where I would go with that. It's important for us to, language is important, and we're still struggling with the language of what to call it. And after school focuses on when and where learning happens, not on how and why learning happens. And we've got the advantage of understanding how and why learning happens in flexible, interest-driven ways, and we're not sharing our knowledge when we just relegate ourselves to a time space.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Shakima.
Hello, hello, hello. So first off, I want to say that this is amazing. I am so inspired by all of you guys on this panel and so this whole table right here especially. So my name is Cole Stevens. I'm the co-founder of Bridge Makers. Shout out Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities. And we're a youth-led organization that assures that no decision is made about young people without young people. So my question is going to kind of be related to that. A little bit of background, like for us, we proved that no decision about young people should be made without young people when we actually changed the law in the state of Minnesota, barring high school students from unemployment benefits. That got over $30 million out to the community at the time. This was during COVID. So the whole reason, appreciate y'all love. I'm saying this because the reason that was successful is because it was young people led and through the whole way. So I think as adults, recognizing like how we uplift young people in the movement making. So my question, as you guys, I had to put the plug in. As you guys have done your work and have listened to young people, we're thinking a lot about how we redefine the purpose of school, but what have you guys heard from young people? We think go to school to get a good job. We think all these other things of what the purpose of school is. In Minnesota, they say the purpose of school is that people graduating should be able to govern their state. That's in our Constitution. But what have you guys heard directly from the mouths of the youth that you serve that they believe they want the purpose of school to be?
Yeah, I'll jump first. Thanks for your work. I want to learn more about it because we got an office in Minnesota, and it looks like the next leader is probably sitting at that table.
All right, okay.
Good Lord. So a couple of things. Number one, I think what Karen pointed out is critically important. I appreciate your question about it, is the centrality of schools. So I think it's first and foremost we should remember and put this in conversation with our definition of child well-being. As we talk about child well-being in the context of CDF, we affirm the work of folks like Ramesh Radhavan of New York University and the Silver Institute that says there are a few components. Number one, young people are able to develop as children their age and stage should, stage more important than age. Number two, that they are preparing and progressing to be successful adults. Number three, that they are able to enjoy being children. Affirming childhood and adolescence and youth as a stage in and of itself, not just a preparatory ground for adulthood. And finally, that it is the responsibility of the community to create the conditions for children to be well, right? So I think that's well-being. Then we have to go back to the originating purpose, which is part of what's in the state constitution in Minnesota, that public schools were not created as workforce development engines. Public schools were created to develop and assure an educated citizenry. So when we talk about this conversation about democracy, this reclamation of schools for the purpose of serving a society whereby people can self-govern is a critical piece, and that has been in many ways co-opted, philanthropically and otherwise, by a conversation that talks about schools only in the context of workforce development. And so that is an important thing. The thing I'll turn to that young people are telling us, specifically our CDF office in Texas, is that this critical work, and I talk about Texas a lot because I'm from Dallas, right? So I try to hold my people accountable first. That two critical things are happening, and it's important to pay attention to Texas because so many, greater proportion of textbooks across the country come out of the state of Texas. And because two things are happening. Number one, there's less citizenship education happening for high school students So this formation in social studies, this teaching of history is being stripped out of both the textbooks and out of the classroom. And the impact that it has, and young people are telling us this, who got a whole report on this, if you go to our CDF Texas website, is they're telling us the impact that it has is that it strips their engagement from democracy if they don't go to college. If you don't go to college, you graduate from high school and you end up not in college, you go to the workforce, you're less likely to vote, less likely to engage in policy advocacy, less likely to be connected in community if you don't go to college. So what has happened is the public school system has effectively removed you from the democratic process in your adult years because it didn't form you for it in your adolescence. And so it's critical, and this is disproportionately happening in places like Texas, more brown, more black states, and it has the impact then when we talk about public policy for the public good, is you keep people who are black or brown, people who are more likely to be impacted by public policy out of the process, so you keep us producing apartheid legislation that further segments life outcomes and segregates them because the people who are making the policy are not the people who are impacted by it. I said apartheid, let me explain. The minority population in Texas runs the legislature, and it's happening other places, and we're keeping people out of the pipeline by not teaching them social studies, not teaching them history, and stripping it out of the textbooks. And what young people are telling us in Texas, and I think it amplifies across the country, is that we want to learn our history, we want to know our story, we want this here because we know it will help us to engage when we have the franchise in our hands. So that's what young people are telling us, and I think that's some of the impacts we need to listen to.
So I'm looking at the time, and it is about that time. We have some tremendous breakouts planned for everyone, but I want to make sure that if there's anything final sitting top of heart or top of mind for you, Kim or Karen, please go ahead and close us out.
I can't top Starsky's amazing description of what schooling should be and what it is. But as the person who tries to get precise about language, I think the chief problem is, and what we hear from young people is, school is an institution that even when it decides to strip out important pieces of education, even when it has enormous inequities in learning and just demoralizes young people to the point that they don't want to learn there, it still exists. And they still have to go through it because it is the credentialing institution that we've put in place. So just acknowledging that often what this meaning making is about the fact that we have to actively help our young people make the meaning out of the fact that while they're required to go to an institution that doesn't serve their needs, they still need to get educated. And if they learn that, they come out better off.
Thank you. Thank you. Kim, final comment?
The power of knowledge is going to be passed on outside of brick and mortar, and the revolution will always begin in our minds. You know, so regardless of how these systems design certain things we get to access or benefits like education, you know, like I said, we're going to continue to teach beyond brick and mortar, continue to, you know, pass our stories on and our history the way we do in community, and stop being so dependent on, we are the knowledge, we are the power. You know, and we have to continue to organize these spaces, and, you know, we're going to try to accommodate for what they're not making happen. And like most things, when it works, they follow. So we're going to continue. Our stories are still going to be told, regardless if we got to argue within the Senate and stuff. We still showing up, and the fact that we are in the most advanced technological society where we can pass information along, we are going to make a way. So, you know, education is not just brick and mortar, not just policy, it's within us, you know, and we have to, you know, I think expand our mind outside of how Western culture has us approaching education, and I think systems work and, you know, that stuff, so.
Thank you. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists. is so much to take away from this conversation, but here's the thing that we hope you will hold in your heart as we continue on our learning journey together today and tomorrow. The spaces that we create, the work that we do, when we show up with our hearts and our minds with a full intentionality about being in service to others, about being in partnership and service to young adults, the idea that our work, that our labor, it not only lives on, but it continues to build the space for future generations. We heard Starsky say this. He talked about 25 years of investments. Anyone in community doing this work knows that that is the minimum of time it takes for us to see the type of impact from the movement that Starsky, that Kim, that Karen are talking about. So I say that to say, we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to pick up this thread, this idea of intergenerational work, intergenerational building that connects the movement from the past to the present and into the future is exactly the conversation we're going to come back together to have this afternoon as we hear from Angela Glover Blackwell and her son, Fred Blackwell. Specifically, how do you continue to connect the dots so that we are advancing equity and justice for young people today, but young people many of us may not ever meet, but we know that this work is necessary. I want to encourage you all, head to your breakouts. We are going to stay on time, so we will get started at 10 a.m., but please be back here by 11:50, because we will get started back here then too. Thank you all so much, and thank you again to our panelists.